Hey there. So today's little mini lesson is all about reflecting points across the axis of your coordinate plane. So here I just made a 4-coordinate graph. So if you remember, this is the x-axis, so I labeled it with an X. The vertical axis up and down is the Y. I also put 2 points that we're going to be working with right now. Point A is over here in the first quadrant, and point B is down here in the third quadrant. So what we're going to do today is we are just going to explore what it would be like to reflect these points across one or more of the axes. So I'm going to start with A. So if we have point A here, and I were to ask us to figure out the coordinates, that just means we're figuring out how to get to A. What are the numbers, the coordinate pair that gets us to A? And the first thing I notice is I head over to the X of +4. So I'm just going to note this here. This is 4. And then we went up 6. So the coordinates for A are 4 and 6, 4, 6. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask us to reflect A across the x-axis. So what that means, if you think about reflecting or reflections, it's like a mirror. You stand up to a mirror, you see your reflection on the other side. Things are matched up, they're mirror image. So what we're doing is we're basically making X into a mirror. So I'm just going to kind of draw this line here to show this is a mirror. So if A is standing 6 steps away from the mirror on this side, it's going to reflect and look like it's 6 steps away on the other side. So if this were my mirror or my reflection line, I could count, if you're a counter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to put my point there. That's called a reflection. And what you need to make sure you do when you reflect, you need to pick the correct axis. They told us X. So this was our mirror or our reflection axis. And whatever the distance is to the point, it's got to be the same distance in the opposite direction. So we're going to call this A prime. So it's A with this little 1 mark, A prime. That just means the reflection. It's the new point, the new A. And what we're going to do is we're just going to label the coordinates for this as well so we can maybe make some observations. So you'll notice this new point is still over 4. So because we reflected across the X stayed the same. They're both 4s. But now that we reflected on the opposite side, we're now at -6 instead of +6. So some people need to kind of show these steps on their graph. Other people can count them with their fingers. And other people just use the numbers. Since this was at 4, +6, a reflection across the X would land us at 4, -6. Let's try the same concept with this point B. Now what we're going to do with B is we are going to reflect it across the y-axis. So if you need to draw this, we're going to make this y-axis here my reflection or my mirror line. So B, what is helpful is to figure out the coordinates. So let's see where B is located. My x coordinate is -8, and my y coordinate down here was -10. Now, if we're going to reflect this across the y, we're still going to have the same y coordinate. So we're still going to stay on this -10 line. But instead of -8 or 8 steps to the left, we're going to go 8 steps to the right. So I'm going to stay on this 10 line, and I'm going to head over here 8 steps to the right. Now, I'm going to label this B prime. And I'm going to make sure that it is in fact reflected. So this one's at +8. And -10. I know that it worked because my y's were the same. I reflected across the y-axis, but my x coordinates were opposite. We started over here at -8. We reflected over here to +8. Okay. So the last thing I want to just do is that you can also do what's called a 2-step reflection. So if I go back to A, we reflected it across the X. We could also take it a step further, and we can maybe ask to reflect it across the Y after that. So I went from A to A prime. Now I'm going to reflect A prime across the Y-axis, and I'm going to have the A double prime, or A with those 2 marks. So if I look at this, we're going to reflect, we're going to stay on this -6 line, but instead of going a +4 steps this way, we're going to go -4 steps in the opposite direction. So this would be A double prime, and this is at -4, -6. Okay, and if you're someone who has to do those little jumps, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps. 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps, and you know you landed in the correct reflection spot. We could do this again and reflect A up here into the next quadrant. You could even do it a 4th time and end up back where you started. So reflections are across axes, and no matter where you start, when you reflect, it heads in the opposite direction across that x-axis. So drawing these reflection lines can really help you. You might be someone who needs to count with your marker or your pencil, or count with your finger, or maybe you're more of a numbers person and you want to take a look at these coordinates as you're reflecting. The last thing I want to note is that if you're reflecting something like a picture, so let's do a little smiley face here. So I'm going to put a smiley face right over here, -6, +1. So I'm going to put a smiley face here. Okay, so there we have this picture. I want to reflect it across the x-axis. So here's my mirror. So instead of being 1 step above this -6 for a smiley face, it's going to be 1 step below. Now, if we reflect something, you also notice that if you look in a mirror, things appear backwards or flipped. So when we flip this upside down, we need to make sure the eyes are at the bottom and we have the smile got flipped upside down. I'm going to move a little bit closer so you can see this. Okay, so keep in mind that if you're ever reflecting a picture, you need to make sure that the picture is reflected or flipped over that axis. Kind of like if you had folded your paper in half and it could have stamped it to the other side, you're going to see something like this. Here's another example. We'll do a triangle that's kind of tall and skinny right there. Okay, so if we were to reflect this triangle across the x-axis or the y-axis, excuse me, we're going to try and flip each of these points. So this point is 2 away from the 5, so we're going to go 2 on this side. This one's 2 away, so here we go. So there's the base of my triangle. And then on the 4 line, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps away. And there we have it. So we have our reflection, but remember it has to flip the image. And that's something just to keep in mind when you're flipping or reflecting with a picture or a shape. So that's all about reflections. Feel free to pause and rewind this. Watch it as many times as you need to make sure you feel good. And good luck on your assignment.